Hey everyone, it's Curtis and I'm back again with another video, and today I'm going to be showing you guys part 2 of my Wonderkids series, and this time we're going to be covering the best defenders. The link to download this list will be down below in the description. It contains 50 of the best defensive Wonderkids, but in this video I'll only be covering 16 of them. And like in my previous video, I'll be splitting the video into 2 parts. The first part will be covering the best of the Wonderkids, and in the second part we'll be covering the best bargains. I will also be splitting up the center backs and fullbacks separately, but let's go and get into the best center backs. And for our first player, to no surprise, we have Matthijs de Ligt, but unfortunately due to him just recently joining Juventus, he'll be virtually impossible for you to sign at the beginning of a new save. But if we take a look at his attributes, we can clearly see why he is one of the best defensive Wonderkids. For being only 19 years old, these attributes are straight up ridiculous. Not only does he have some of the best technical attributes for a defender, but he also has surprisingly great mental attributes for being so young. He will definitely be one of the best defenders for a long time. When we jump to 10 years in the future, we can see that he develops quite nicely as we see his technical attributes have stayed roughly the same, but his mental and physical attributes have gone up. He started off at an insane 154 current ability, but he has grown it all the way up to a 179, which is at least 10 more points than the second best player on this list. He's a truly great player, but that won't come as a shock to anyone. On to our second player, we have Niccolò Armini, who in fact, he's not only one of the best Wonderkids, but he's also one of the best bargains. So I kind of had to determine which list to put him in, so I went ahead and just put him in the best overall list, but he's actually insanely good for just £1 million you can get this guy for. But I will make a side note that my transfer fees may not always be 100% accurate. They should be pretty close to what you can expect to pay for a player, but just keep in mind, they may not be completely accurate. Now, while Armini may not start off as strong as de Ligt at the beginning of a save, he definitely turns himself into one of the best as he improves basically all of his assets required in being a quality defender. He takes his current ability from a 99 to a 165, and he most notably increases his heading from an 8 to a 15, his marking from a 12 to a 16. And also something interesting is that at the beginning of his save, he was listed as a right-only preferred foot player, but in 2029, he's actually listed as a left preferred foot player. Just something interesting that he can pretty much be good with both feet, it looks like. And honestly, for this quality of player, he's easily worth his £1 million price tag. And our third player, we have Dayot Upamecano, who starts off with some pretty decent stats at the start of an FM save, but he won't come cheap as his price tag is around £90 million. I will say though, his biggest weakness in terms of when he first starts in the FM save would be definitely his positioning. If you do end up getting this player, I would definitely look to improve that attribute specifically. But when we see him after 10 years, he does improve his positioning to a 15. He also takes his 135 current ability and increases it to a 164. His technical attributes may have only gotten minor upgrades, but his mental attributes have definitely gone up by a significant amount. As you move quickly to our fourth player, we have yet another player that could easily belong on the bargain list. And I'm going to totally butcher his name, but his name is Anthony Ralt. He can be found for about £4 million at the beginning of a save, and already starts off with pretty decent defensive attributes. I will say though that his physical attributes are a little bit on the low side, but they surely will go up over time. And when we see him after 10 years, we can definitely see that yes, those physical attributes have gone up, as well as his mental attributes. But I will say he's not the most diverse player technically. But my goodness, is he incredibly strong in his defensive abilities. And a great buy for just £4 million if you can spare the cash. And our fifth and last of our best overall center backs, we have Ethan Ampadu. He, I can safely say, does not really belong in the bargain list as he is going to come with a £100 million price tag. But for just being 18 years old, we can clearly see why he belongs on this list as he has incredibly strong attributes from the get-go. And if we take a look at him in the future, he's obviously going to improve most of his stats as we see him take his 126 current ability and rise it to a 157. I will make a note that his heading is a bit low for a center back as he only improved it from an 11 to a 13, so he may not be the best at aerial challenges, but he definitely has the skills to dispossess any attacking players. But as we move on to fullbacks, we obviously have one of the best, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Even at his young age, he's already one of the best fullbacks in the world. But he won't come cheap as he's going to demand about £115 million if you would like to purchase this player. But we can clearly see why his price tag is as high as this kid is just incredible. He starts off at a 154 current ability, but when we look into the future, he jumps that up to a 168, improving virtually every single attribute by at least 1 to 2 points. He's insanely well-rounded as he literally really only has 2 attributes in the white. He's just an amazing player, and it's easy to see why Liverpool made sure to keep him at the club. As we move on to our second fullback, we have Moussa Wagué, who will also not come very cheap at £90 million. But he starts off at an also insane 145 current ability, which it may not be as high as Trent's, but it's still insanely good for how young he is. And he has so much to improve. As we look to the future, we can see that he definitely improves himself substantially over the 10 years. He rises his current ability to a 167 while also increasing his passing and positioning from an 11 to a 14, and obviously making small improvements to all of his other stats. And once again, we have a club that was wise enough to hold on to one of their star fullbacks in Barcelona. Next up, we have our second English fullback on the list. His name is Rhys James, but this player will come to be virtually unsignable at the start of a save, as Chelsea will not budge on letting this player go. He starts off at 19 and a new save, and he honestly is one of the best at a position already. As you look at him at just 19, you can't ask for much of a better player at his position, as he already has a respectable 136 current ability, and we see that rise to a 159 after 10 years. While none of his attributes increase by an insane amount, they do pretty much all go up by about 2 points across the board. And once again, we have a player that is kept on the same club throughout the 10 years, as Chelsea made sure to hold on to their star Wonderkid. And for our next fullback, you guessed it, it's a third English fullback. I'm telling you right now, England is going to be set on fullbacks for quite a while, as Max Aaron comes in at a cheap £65 million. I mean, obviously it's not that cheap, but for this list, apparently he's going to be one of the cheaper ones, insanely enough. But don't worry, I will be covering actual bargain fullbacks later in this video. And obviously, once again, we have another strong player, as he starts off at 135 current ability, and we see that come up to be a 157 over time. And once again, he rises all of his attributes by about 1 or 2 points. I will say, though, I did notice that his dribbling did decrease from a 12 to a 10, so I'm not too sure what happened, but keep that in mind, that you may want to make sure he's getting some dribbling training as you're developing this player if you do have him, because for whatever reason that did decrease. But we have our first fullback that has actually switched clubs. He went from Norwich to Manchester United. But I'm going to be honest, I would have actually been surprised if Norwich were able to manage to hold on to this quality of player. I don't mean that as any offense to Norwich. But let's go and get into some of our bargains. Starting with center backs, we have David Batella, and he can be bought for about £4.5 million. At 19, he starts off at a 115 current ability. While it's not that insane, he has decent attributes if you're looking to plug this guy into your starting lineup right away. And honestly, when we look into the future to see how he develops, we can see why the £4.5 million price tag is actually not that bad of a deal, as he rises his current ability to 158 and actually turns out to be one of the best defenders. Next up, we have Gabrielle Corbeau, who is actually our second Italian center back already on this bargain list, and he can be found for a similar pricing of £4 million. And honestly, he's actually very similar to Batella in a lot of ways, at least in this particular save. As we see, when he develops, he turns himself to a 152 current ability. And while he may not turn out as nicely as Batella has, if you've got the cash, you could actually just straight up buy both of these players and have two of the best Italian center backs for the next decade plus. And next up on our bargain center backs, we have Lootera Valenti, who will actually be our cheapest for center backs at £2 million. As honestly, this guy is really good that he can be easily in your starting lineup from the very get-go if you buy him at the start of a save. And as we look to the future, we can see that he improves his mental and physical attributes massively over the 10 years, while also raising his current ability from a 117 to a 152. He truly is a bargain if you're able to snag him early in your save. Next up, we have Bruno Immune, and he can be obtained for about £2.5 million. And interestingly enough, he's our second Argentinian on this bargain list. And at 17, he actually has pretty great attributes when you consider the price you're having to spend for this player. And if we look to his future, we can see that actually I was a bit disappointed in how his technical attributes turned out. They didn't improve as much as I thought they were going to. I'm not too sure if that's like a product of unfortunate development or if this is actually his ceiling, but overall he still is a decent buy and a decent player to consider if you're wanting to have a decent bargain. But overall, he still is a nice player to consider. Last on our bargain center backs, we have our youngest player on the list at 16 years old. His name is Marco Cana, and I will admit he's not the biggest of bargains at £10 million, but I wanted to include him because of how young he is, and honestly the potential is definitely there for him to turn into one of the best. Because if we look at 26, the save ended up being in June, so he's not 27 yet. But he turns his current ability into 138, which I don't think really paints the picture of how well this guy turns out to be. While he does lack jumping reach due to his height, he makes up in virtually every other category required of him as a defender. But honestly, if you look here at his positions, he can play as a midfielder. Obviously, he'd be more defensive-minded, but he could actually thrive better in that position as he does have basically all the attributes required of him to fit in that role. So just keep that in mind that you may want to even add him as a defensive-minded midfielder. But let's go ahead and go into our bargain fullbacks. Let's have 3 of them. And first up, we have Noah Cataract, and he can be found for about £4 million. And while I'll admit that he's not elite right out of the gates like some of these other players on this list, we can see that in the future, he turns out to be quite a nice player. His passing is a bit of a concern as it only gets to an 11. But I did want to just point that out, that if you are obtaining this player, you may want to make that one of your focal points of improvement, is that his passing needs to be improved. But honestly, other than that, he's above average in all the other categories. And next up, we have Bosco Sutala. And yeah, I'm pretty much butchering all of these names. I apologize once again for that. But he's going to be bought for about £3 million. And honestly, one of the best benefits of this player is he can play anywhere on the back line. He can play right fullback, left fullback, and also center back. So just a nice diverse player that can be like kind of a plug and play for if you have an injured starting player that you need to plug in. This is a great buy, I would say, for the £3 million price tag. And if we see him 10 years in the future, he improves most everything, except for I did notice that his dribbling started off at a 12 and actually dropped to a 10. But honestly, that's not too big of a loss if you're not looking for him to be like an attacking fullback. If you are looking for him to be an attacking fullback, obviously you're going to want to make sure he can maintain that dribbling skill. But he seems to be more defensive-minded anyway, so you may just not even care that his dribbling went down a little bit. But easily, he's a great player as he improved his current ability to a 102 to a 146. I really like this guy. And for our last bargain, I saved the cheapest for last, as he can be bought for a measly £250,000. His name is Yan Kuto, and he's barely 17 years old at the beginning of an FM save, but you can clearly see that he has immense potential, especially when you're considering the cheap price tag. And we see he clearly improves himself by quite a bit as he turns his 82 current ability into a 141. And he's honestly one of the better tacklers for a fullback, which I myself prefer a lot. I love a good fullback that can tackle. And is easy a steal for the price. Definitely look to get this guy if you're able to snag him at the beginning of a save. But that will conclude the list of players that I had outlined for this specific defensive Wonderkids list. There is 50 in total, so if you're looking to get the rest of the players on the list, it will be downloadable down below in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like down below. And also be sure to subscribe, as I do have my midfielders and attackers video yet to come. And you don't want to miss that, as I have some really good bargains for you guys. And also we'll cover some of the best as well. But I'll see you guys in the next video.